Big welcome to everybody while you're coming in. I know a lot of folks, you're just arriving into the Zoom. My name is Lily, and I am Sharon's Director of Operations and run this challenge for her every year, and I'm happy to be here with you guys. Sharon, you want to say hi so we know we can hear you?
Hello.
Oh, good.
It's lovely to be here with you all. I don't know if you feel like putting in the chat where you're tuning in from. I always enjoy that feeling of seeing that just as we are gathering more fully. Mostly what was people were writing was, "Is this started? I don't hear anything." So,
Yeah.
oh, look at all this fast.
Amazing. So I thought I would just welcome you all and give you some particulars about the flow of our time today. We are really just coming together here to give you a chance to ask questions to Sharon about your experience this month with the meditation challenge. And we've been getting some great questions in the comments, but it's not always the same thing as actually getting to see Sharon live. So that's part of why we wanted to offer the space, and also to kind of gather virtually. Often when we do this challenge every year, we have like a big launch party in person in New York, or in past years we've also done it in LA. So we get to do it a little bit virtually this year. And we're also streaming this on Facebook. So I know there's going to be people also watching us who aren't actually doing the challenge, and just thought it would be beneficial for everybody to kind of be part of the conversation. So we have about an hour together, and I'll be moderating the conversation since there's so many of you attending. We thought that would be just a little more streamlined. And if you'd like to ask a question, you can do so by clicking in the Q&A box and typing in your question there, instead of in the chat where you all just listed your location: freezing in Hell's Kitchen, New York, Ohio. And then I'll be sorting through the questions, and some of them will be similar, some that will kind of combine, some of them will be unique, and we also have some other questions that are coming in from Facebook. So we are recording this, so it will be available for everyone later. We have about 12,000 people doing the challenge this year from all over the place. And so the folks in Europe and Australia are not live with us right now because they're sleeping. So they'll get to watch it later.
At least one is here from Australia. So I was thinking, what time is it? Like, good morning or something.
Yeah, good morning to them. So yeah, without further ado, we'll pass it to you, Sharon. And
fabulous. Thank you so much, Lillian. The challenge actually began, I guess, 11 years ago now, when I wrote a book called Real Happiness. And the original title was Real Happiness, The Power of Meditation, a 28-day program. And a woman named Ambika, who was working with me at the time, said, the book's coming out in January. February has 28 days. Let's do a challenge. And I thought, maybe, and it proved to be, I think, a wonderful suggestion. It does many things, as those of you who are trying it out know. It does create a sense of community, which is quite wonderful. And especially in these days where so many people are feeling isolated and quite lonely and cut off, it's kind of amazing to be able to come together with people around the same values and the same kind of interest and reflection and contemplation. It also is a program for either beginning or renewing a meditation practice. And I'm the kind of person, not everyone is, but I'm the kind of person that feels well served by structure. I often joke, although it's very true, that it's very good for me to have the intention to meditate every day, even if not for very long each day. Because for me to try to practice 3 days a week, and I know the challenge, encourages that, if that's what you feel is right for you. But for me, if I were thinking about 3 days a week, it would be Monday, and I think I'll start on Wednesday. Then it'd be Wednesday, and I'll think, oh, I think I'll do it 3 times on Saturday, and but every day is every day, and to have a time defined commitment, not the rest of my life, but something that feels really manageable is something that really serves me very well. So this is like our effort to offer a template for you to see what practices may be appealing or challenging in a good kind of way, and to work with different structures so that you can feel some greater support in your practice. So I'd like to begin by doing a short period of meditation together. I always find it really helpful just to more fully get a sense of arriving and kind of gathering our energy together. Whatever you were doing just before tuning in, there's always something, and it's something about recognizing the energy it took to get here, not doing the other thing that was calling you, or dealing with technology, as might be the case, so and now we're here. So let's just sit together for a few minutes. You can sit comfortably, close your eyes or not, however you feel most at ease. We can start just by listening to sound, whether it's the sound of my voice or other sounds. And see if you can have the sounds come and go, just wash through you. Even though, of course, we like certain sounds and we don't like others. And bring your attention to the feeling of your body sitting, whatever sensations you discover. See if you can feel the earth supporting you. Feel space touching you. Usually we think about touching space and we think about like picking up a finger and poking it in the air, but really space is already touching us. It's always touching us. And you can move into receptive mode. Bring your attention to your hands and see if you can move from that more conceptual level, let go fingers, to the world of direct sensation, picking up pulsing, throbbing, pressure, whatever it might be. You don't have to name these things, but feel them. And bring your attention to the feeling of your breath, just the normal, natural breath, wherever you feel it most distinctly. The nostrils, the chest, or the abdomen. You can find that place, bring your attention there, and just rest. And if you have not been using the breath, but using another object as a kind of home base, go there. Feeling of your hands touching, or your hands touching your knee, whatever it might be. The idea is a place to rest, where we don't have to manufacture or embellish the experience. We can simply be with it. And if you find yourself distracted, lost in thought, tossed around in a fantasy, or you fall asleep, truly don't worry about it. You can recognize you've been gone. See if you can let go gently and with great kindness toward yourself. Bring yourself back to the breath or that primary object. We let go and we begin again. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze and we'll end the meditation. So thank you so much for that. Somebody wrote in the chat they wondered where I was tuning in from. So I'm in Barre, Massachusetts, next door through the forest, a little ways from the Insight Meditation Society, which is about to have a pretty big anniversary. It's the 45th anniversary on February 14th on Valentine's Day. And it's been closed since maybe March 16th, something like that. But it's there and it's kind of amazing. I went over there a while ago, a couple of months ago, so it had already been closed for a really long time. I went over to film something because it was the only space that was like big enough to do it. And I went into the meditation hall and it was like as full of light and presence as it always had been. It wasn't like didn't feel deserted or kind of empty. It was really very interesting, and we're looking forward someday to. I'm quite confident we'll reopen, and whenever that happens. So that's where I am, is Massachusetts.
Great. Well, I thought we would start the questions with, we have a number of questions coming in that are kind of starting from a pretty practical place of people who are sitting for the first time with the breath and just having some difficulty with having a natural breath and not having it be affected once they start to pay attention to it. And I was wondering if you could just speak to that a little bit.
Well, I mean, I think it's inevitable probably that the breath will be affected somewhat. And so you don't really want to make a project out of having a natural breath, because then you'll constantly be assessing and evaluating and getting tense and more tense. And the idea is really not to have a preconceived notion so that you're dissatisfied from the beginning. Like, my breath isn't deep enough. It's not filling my body, whatever, and there are other systems which work with the breath in a very deliberate way to get it to be different than the way it is, but that's not this system. And so it's not putting those other systems down. They can be really great for what they are. This is considered more an awareness practice than a breath practice. And so we just use the breath, if you use the breath, as what we call that primary object or home base, in part because, as my early teachers would say, first of all, you don't have to believe anything in order to feel the breath. You don't have to call yourself a Buddhist or Hindu or reject anything else. If you're breathing, you can be meditating. And then one said, I always felt very charmingly, he said, the breath is very portable. So if you practice for 12 minutes a day, which is the latest number I've heard from a neuroscientist friend of mine, to change your brain, it's 12 minutes a day. But we can talk about that later. If you practice for 12 minutes a day in a more formal, dedicated way, and in part you use the breath to come back to yourself, to come back to this moment, then you're at work or you're commuting, you're in some crazy situation with a lot of pressure, a lot of agitation, a lot of anxiety, you have the breath. And it's right there for you as a resource. And I always appreciated that it was totally private. It's like nobody has to know you're doing it. You're breathing, in order to center. And then the third reason the breath is often chosen is also the reason why it doesn't always work for people, which is that it's said to be fairly neutral. This is just the home base for our attention. It's not the ultimate goal of this kind of meditation to just be with the breath. And so there may be many things, and there are many things that arise in the course of one's meditation that are beautiful and wondrous and heartening and uplifting. And there are many things that may arise that are disconcerting, like, thought I got rid of that long ago, or why is that still there? Or I've avoided this nicely for a long time, but here it is, or whatever it might be. And then we have the breath, which is just the place to chill, to recalibrate what it feels like to simply be with an experience. And so that's really what the breath is serving as. And again, it may not be serving, you may choose another object. And, we offer several possibilities having to do with touch sensation and moving your attention through your body, or listening to sounds, which will serve in exactly the same way. So in this system, it's not really about how you are breathing.
Great. And then the next question that's kind of in that same department is just around folks. I've had several questions come in about when they're becoming uncomfortable in their sitting posture, like how long to stay with it before making an adjustment.
I don't think there's a formula, I'm smiling because many teachers, many approaches will say something different. And I've often felt at this point in my life, having meditated for so long and with so many different teachers, that it's almost like different schools might have an approach where they're trying to deepen a particular quality of mind first, or primarily. And once that's strengthened, then they open up to include others, so you get, in the end, you get a more balanced group of qualities that you're really have developed. So some approaches really will have that central quality be resolution and determination and They will say, sit there through the pain. We once brought here in Barrie to the Insight Meditation Society, we once brought a very renowned Burmese monk named Tampulu Sayadaw to teach. And we were just, next door, just doing a kind of casual Q&A session in this room where this is a long time ago. This is one like the only furniture we had were stuff that people's families had given us and things like that, so we had like these plush armchairs in this particular room and we're all sitting on the floor. And somebody asked Tampulu Sayadaw, how long should I sit being with pain? Exactly this question, before I do something else. And Tampulu Sayadaw said, don't be with it very long. And he pointed to one of those plush armchairs and said, get up right away and sit in one of those. And all I could think was, where were you when I was like practicing in India, sweating and trying and sitting on the floor, and there were no armchairs. And, the idea is to remember the goal is not to break through pain and certainly not to injure yourself. The goal is to have a more balanced relationship to everything that comes our way. So you might not leap to your feet right away and look for an armchair unless you're already in an armchair, which is also possible. But you also might move your attention to something that's easier to be with. I had another Burmese teacher, Sayadaw U Pandita, who we brought here in 1984, who was extremely fierce and intense. And he was a wonderful teacher, but he was really tough. And one day he was doing a question and answer session in the meditation hall, and somebody asked, how long should I pay attention to pain, looking at physical pain, before I move my attention to something that's easier to be with? So that might be listening to sound. It might be feeling something in your body that's kind of refreshing or soothing. It might mean doing loving kindness practice, something like that. And it's a very interesting question because it also figures in our understanding of emotional pain, heartache, disappointment. How long should I just be with it before I move to something that's easier? And I thought, given U Pandita's personality, he was going to say you should just be with the pain till you fall over. I really did. And to my astonishment, he said, don't be with it for very long. Be with the pain, move to something that's easier. Maybe go back to the pain and then move to something that's easier. He said, it's not wrong to like be with the pain and be with the pain and be with the pain, but you'll likely get exhausted. So why not build in balance all along the way? And I was sitting there thinking, well, if those words are coming out of his mouth, it must really be true, because he was like the furthest thing in the universe from somebody who would say something just to be nice. And this is a very important consideration. People feel, if you give that instruction, people often will respond with, well, you think I can't do the real thing. You're giving me like this remedial work. If I were stronger, if I were more courageous, if I were a better meditator, I could just be with the pain and be with the pain and be with the pain. But likely you'll get exhausted. So our goal is really balance, not like breaking through in some way or proving something in an over heroic way. So I would say when the pain starts coming, see if you can take an interest in it for a few minutes, maybe moments. See if you can feel the constituent elements, like maybe it's moments of burning, moments of twisting, moments of this, moments of that. And if you feel that you are getting tighter in the rest of your body and you can't release that, if you feel that you're just kind of getting into that mode of like gritting your teeth, or you're about to, it's better to move. It's much better to move. And so it's not a sign of failure. It really isn't. The idea is that if you move, if you shift posture and there's still time left in the amount of time you had decided to sit, it's a new beginning. It's just like when your mind wanders and you start over, rather than thinking, well, I'll just wiggle, or I'll just give up, or I'm defeated, you're not. It's a brand new sitting once you start again.
Great. And as a follow-up to that, we've gotten a lot of questions about mental pain, emotional pain, anxiety. Here's one question. I suffer from PTSD and very bad anxiety attacks with racing brain. Would you suggest with the mindfulness that would be the best way to sit with it? As it does get so overwhelming that it makes me feel like I can't cope.
I think in terms of tools, it's like an experiment, and we make experiments so we get some confidence in dealing with different tools. You just have to be careful that it doesn't become like pass fail, like maybe something helps you today feel more balanced in the face of what's happening, and it's not going to help tomorrow, but that's okay because you just deal with different tools. I think a few things are important. One is that you relieve yourself of some kind of notion of an image of like a perfect meditator. You don't have to be sitting upright. There have been plenty of times when I've suggested to people just curl up in a fetal position and do your practice. Don't have this notion of like this particular posture, sitting motionless, cross-legged. I mean, maybe it's too scary to do that, honestly. Walking meditation or movement meditations at different times might be better. When I've worked with people who are recently out of like a deeply traumatic experience, like war, uh, there have been times when it seemed clear that the best thing was not even a formal sitting. It was like, feel the cup, feel the weight of the cup, feel the warmth of the cup, smell the tea, taste the tea. It was bringing mindfulness, that same quality of mindfulness into activity, into life. And that was kind of the balancing agent. It might be that, you make the experiment with being with the breath because of course, it can be soothing and your whole system can settle down. They do say in science that, there are many kind of formal patterned ways of doing this, but basically if your out breath is longer than your in breath, your parasympathetic nervous system will start taking over from your sympathetic nervous system and your blood pressure will start to go down. Your whole system will kind of ease. And sometimes it is more formal, like breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 8, but it actually, I'm told, doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that your out breath be longer than your in breath, and just see, is that what's working? I also find that loving kindness meditation can be really useful because in a way, these states of panic, of anxiety, of distress, they're like all high energy states. And with any high energy state, whether it's restlessness or much more extreme than that, we have different approaches. One is kind of soothe it, settle it down. And the other is understanding that a big energy needs a big space within which to move. So if you've got like a really big energy going on and you're trying to have it move through a tight, confined, constricted space, it's going to be really jangly. Whereas if you can just have a bigger sense of space, the energy can actually move. And so some people will go out and look at the sky or do loving kindness practice for all beings everywhere, take in the whole world, or and you learn different ways of creating that space. And loving kindness in particular also channels that energy, just like walking does. So the energy can actually start moving. And in loving kindness, it's taking a very disturbing kind of energy and it's channeling into something that's beneficial for ourselves and for others. So there are many possibilities. Of course, if you're really struggling, if you're really suffering, then ideally you see if you can find a teacher to work with, and especially someone who will remind you again and again, because every single one of us usually needs to be reminded again and again. You're doing okay. It doesn't have to look like that pretzel-like posture. You don't have to sit for an hour with your eyes closed. There are lots and lots of ways of practicing.
Great. And we did also have some questions coming in about folks who, due to different mobility limitations, can't do walking meditation. Is there a substitute that you offer for that?
Yeah, I mean, there are many substitutes. Uh, in a couple of things we've written, we have like wheeling meditation for people who are in wheelchairs. Um, but basically, the idea is just eyes open rather than you may be sitting with your eyes closed in sitting, eyes open and active. You know, there's some schools in Burma where people raise their hand up and down. Or I'm into drinking tea. It's like you can get all the same benefits of walking meditation through some activity, because it's just about bringing mindfulness into life and doing something that is likely going to raise our energy, just like walking will.
Great. A couple of questions have come in about really being able to stay connected to a mindfulness practice or even a breath-based practice when in crisis. And in particular, there was a question about a negative work environment. So here's the question. I want to know what strategies Sharon suggests for when someone who is difficult to work with creates a negative work environment and makes comments that make one feel badly about themselves. I've been meditating and attending therapy for years, but somehow a negative manager still manages to disrupt my peace. And I haven't found how to cope with these comments without them affecting me.
Um, I think it's interesting to note, for any of us, how impactful something like that might be. Like I've done work with people really on the front lines of suffering, and these days it would likely be, medical personnel. Um, and sometimes we've asked people in the beginning of the program, as we look at issues of resilience, um, well, I'll tell you the whole model. Like you can do this as a journaling exercise, or you could do this as a reflection. And let's say it's journaling. In the first column, we'd say write down the strong sources of stress at work. And sometimes it was surprising for people because they'd write down exactly like this kind of thing. The negative comments of a supervisor or a bad relationship with colleagues, and wasn't even like the intractable system they were trying to help people go through, work through, but something like that. And just to realize these things can be quite impactful. And then in the next column, we ask people to write down what they do to lift their spirits, to get a break, to have some resilience, to have perspective on things. And sometimes people would write down, I get out in nature. I think for 4 years in this one program, every single time that people entered the program and did this, they wrote down listen to music. Well, it was all different kinds of music. And sometimes people wrote down I drink a lot, something like that. And then in the third column, we asked them to look back at what they had just written down and write down how they felt about it. So if they wrote down I drink a lot, very often they'd say, actually, I'm a little worried about that. Maybe I want to find some other tools. Or this actually happened once, I'm sure more than once, but somebody had written down, I get out in nature. And then they wrote down, of course, I haven't done it in about 7 years. So you think, well, maybe get on it, and obviously we live in a very strange time in that so many things are not available to us that once were. But to understand that we may well have coping mechanisms and things that have helped us with resilience that we may not be exercising so much right now. And if we can, maybe we should really think about going back there. And in addition, we can learn new tools. like mindful movement or meditation, things like that, that may be helping. I'll tell you what I do in those situations. Um, with somebody who really has a kind of toxic energy. And it goes back to this cute little story from the time of the Buddha, where they said the Buddha one day he did something like he walked on this farmer's land without the farmer's permission, something like that. So the farmer got really angry at him and came over to him and started yelling at him and screaming at him and cursing him and reviling him. So the Buddha said to him, "O farmer, if you prepare a gift for someone and they refuse to take it out of your hand, what happens to it?" So the farmer said, "Well, if I prepare a gift for someone and they refuse to take it out of my hand, then it's going to remain with me." And then the Buddha said, "Just so, O farmer, I'm refusing your gift of cursing and screaming and reviling and abusing. It's going to remain with you." So I don't like say that to people, which probably wouldn't be that skillful, but I think it sometimes. I even do the imagery. I think not taking it out of your hand is going to remain with you. Because, of course, that is the truth, that if somebody were more together, were happier, were more at peace, they would not be as toxic as, a manifestation can be. So the point isn't being able to change them, it's not having it enter your heart, so deeply. And in the end, honestly, you do have a kind of compassion for people like that.
Thank you. So there have been several questions coming in about grief and loss. My dad passed away a couple of months back. Curious on Sharon's take on meditation to connect with the departed and or heal from childhood challenges. Another similar question. Can you talk about meditation and deep grief?
Well, I mean, I think it is a time of obviously, of really tremendous grief. Both, people have often lost somebody that, it's a very difficult time where we also don't have necessarily the same rituals that once brought us together around a time of mourning. Um, there's a lot of grieving of the life we once thought was to be, and needing to reconcile to the fact that it's all changed. I mean, I came up here March 14th thinking I was coming here for 2 weeks. Still here. And everything I thought I was going to do and accomplish and how it was going to be and the people I was going to see and the friendships, and it's not the same. And even like the person I mentioned who had come back from war in Iraq and we were working with, it's like had tremendously shattered ideals and a vision of possibility or what life was about, what he thought his country was about, that had just been shattered. And he was grieving, which took me a long time to understand that that's what he was actually going through. Um, and certainly in this time where, uh, we may not have the hoped for ability to say goodbye in person or, something like that. It's a very difficult time. I mean, I think many things. So um, one is that in general, I've not found this a culture, and I know you're tuning in from around the world, so you may have a different experience where you are, but certainly in the States, I've not found it a culture that largely is sympathetic to the truth of loss and and grief. People often feel there should be a time limit, or I think in America there's such a premium on being in control at all times that it feels wrong that you haven't like picked up again, and or whatever it might be. And it's not wrong. All these things take time, and it's an unfolding. So I think we also have that challenge, many of us, of going against what has been absorbed by us as conditioning in some way. Somebody once wrote somewhere that grief is love, which doesn't have the normal place to land. The person's not there, or the situation's not there, but at the heart of it is love. And that was something that was very helpful for me to realize that, and as well as looking at the loss, I could uh, look at the love and actually be grateful that that also existed, and that seemed important as well. Um, it helps to find people, if you can, who understand the nature of feeling pain and feeling vulnerable. And if anything, the vulnerability we all have to loss should be one of the things that brings us together. We should feel ever more united, because there is no one who is left out of that. Um, and yet, so much of society has kind of sent us apart from one another. And so really making a point of finding some kind of supportive community can help. And then in terms of practice, I'll give you an answer. I'll give you a response from a very classical perspective of the Buddhist teaching, which has also been very important for me. Um, uh, they believe, and this is something that you can practice whether you're experiencing loss or not. They believe that when we do something toward the good, we're kind, we're generous, we're restrained. Like, it would be awfully easy to tell a lie, but we don't. We meditate, even if it feels like we have totally crummy concentration. We seek to understand, we question, we study, we want to look deeper. All these things they produce a positive energy. And the energy, that positive energy, is called merit in the traditional teachings. It's probably an unfortunate translation, but nonetheless, that's what it's called. So it's not like stuff that's in a warehouse somewhere that can be traded, but it's that moving toward the good. It's opening to a sense of possibility, and it's the positive energy. So when you have done something toward the good, it's very common to then dedicate that positive energy to someone else, and ultimately to all beings everywhere. So someone who's helped you, as one example. And you get to do a meditation, and we then realize, well, I wouldn't have been able to do that except this person was taking over childcare or whatever. And so you dedicate the positive energy of your having meditated to this person who's helped you. And it's a way of just linking what you've been able to do with that being. And very classically, we dedicate the merit of our actions, our positive actions, to someone who's died. And we don't have to get into the ins and outs of believing in rebirth or not, but they do believe, in a country, say like Burma, that the most powerful connection we can have with somebody beyond the body, beyond time, beyond space, is our own good-heartedness. And even if you think of it just as honoring their memory, or however, if this strikes you as something interesting to pursue, you can use a lot of different conceptual models for it. But the idea is that you reaffirm your connection to that being through an act that's positive, that's good, that's helpful in some way, and just actually offering the positive energy to. So like in Burma, for example, when I went there to practice in the 80s, we didn't pay anything to be there, not even room and board, and everything we needed was offered to us by the people. And it was, certainly in those days, one of the poorest countries in the world. And every meal was an offering. And if your daughter graduated from high school, you'd go to the monastery and you try to offer the best of what you could. Or on your birthday, you didn't think to celebrate by getting gifts, you celebrate by giving gifts. So you go to the monastery and you offer, you didn't like bring the food, you paid the money, for them to cook the food. Once we went in, or if somebody dies in the family, then you honor their memory by making an offering, and then you dedicate the merit of that offering to their memory, to them. So once we went in and lunch, which is like 10 in the morning, it's like the last meal you get for the whole day because of these monastic rules, is usually a pretty formal thing. You have a processional as you go into the dining room, and then you bow down to the Buddha, and then you're sitting on the floor around these tables, which have maybe four of you are sitting around each table. So I went in and I bowed to the Buddha and I sat down and I took a look at the meal it's served family style and all these, pans and stuff. And I looked down and I thought, that looks like chicken soup. And I thought, that looks like whitefish salad. This is like an entire Jewish meal. I'm like hallucinating. This is really weird. Something's gone really off in my meditation. And then when they did the sharing of the merit ceremony, it turned out that there was a very tiny Jewish population in Rangoon and somebody had died. And so the family had gone to the monastery, and not only did they offer the money, they offered the recipes for that meal. And sure enough, it was like an entire Jewish meal. But there's something about your good-heartedness and your efforts to make this a better world or help someone out or learn yourself that is considered the most powerful way to stay really connected with somebody.
Thank you. Here's a question about meditation for children. The lives and routines of children have been profoundly disrupted by the pandemic. What do you think about meditation for children?
They have been really profoundly disrupted. I see that just from, reading chats and these various Zoom sessions. I think meditation for children is great, and there are many, many ways of doing it. I just did an interview for this project I'm involved in with these friends of mine that I teach with periodically. They have this organization called the Holistic Life Foundation in Baltimore, where they teach yoga and meditation to kids in the inner city schools, and they have amazing results. They have like many schools have started these mindful minute rooms where everything is kind of soothing and there's nice music and you get tea and there are people sitting there and they help you just remember to breathe, and kids are going there instead of detention, and it's working really well. And they have, if you look up the Holistic Life Foundation, they had a video of it that really went viral. I mean, we say my thing went viral when we have like 58, retweets or something, but they had like millions and millions. So they would be an example. There's many books these days on meditation for children, often different mindfulness exercises, and they're all need to be developmentally appropriate in terms of the age of the child. And for very young kids, they tend to have kids lie down on the floor and put a stuffed animal on their belly, and they watch the bunny or something go up and down, and that's the beginning. I've taught meditation to children just a little bit myself, and what I found, and you you could say that it's not a, because I teach so much loving kindness meditation, maybe it's not a fair test, but I have found that many children resonate very strongly with that, even if they don't get that moved by the mindfulness practice where you actually offer loving kindness through the silent repetition of certain phrases like, may you feel safe, may you be happy. And again, I just try to make it developmentally appropriate. Think of a friend, someone you really like, or maybe a teacher that you like. And, I remember saying once, think of a friend you usually like, but now you're mad at them, to get some of that in. Or, you play in various ways, but I think it could be hugely helpful. And just seeing, the kids that my friends in Baltimore work with have been traumatized for a long time. And in a couple of my books, I tell this story about this little girl they told me about because I liked it so much, where she was maybe like 7 years old and she was always in fights. The kids were teasing her a lot and they were mean to her for sure, but she would be like knocking them out, and then she would get into really big trouble. And they taught her how to meditate. And one day they walked into some public room like the gymnasium or cafeteria or something. And she had this other little girl like up against the wall holding her by the throat. And then she looked at her and she said, "You're just lucky I learned how to meditate." And she dropped her. And then she went off into the corner and just like composed herself. So, I mean, there's a lot there that I think could be really helpful.
That's such a good story. Here's another question. I live in a very small space, which I share with family members. There's not one corner that can be set aside for my quiet use for meditation. So I meditate in the midst of sometimes a lot of noise and distractions. Do you have any tips for me?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, you know, again, there's sort of like the division into two parts. One is the formal 12 minutes or whatever of meditation. And then there's what we call short moments many times. It is feeling the warmth of the teacup. Um, in terms of short moments many times, maybe the most famous example is Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Zen teacher, saying, don't pick up your phone on the first ring, let it ring 3 times and breathe. And then you pick it up. Or what I've gotten into the habit of doing is not pressing send on the email right away, but taking a few breaths and then reading it again and then deciding if I want to edit it in some way. And, it's just bringing the practice into life. And so you don't need quiet for that. In fact, you need the phone ringing, or you need the signal you have decided on. That's going to be the time for you to like take a pause or take a breath or bring mindfulness into movement, something like that. In terms of the formal dedicated period, um, I don't know if you can uh, even close your eyes, if that is gonna like just be too weird. But if you can, um, there are lots of times where we have to incorporate the sound that is around us. We just have to, because otherwise we're full of resentment and we resist it, and the rest of our body tightens up, and we try to make it go away and it doesn't work. I often laugh because I did my earliest practice in India, which is phenomenally noisy. And then in the 80s, I went off into practice in Burma, which was also noisy. And in the 90s, I was often in Nepal, which was also exceedingly noisy. And people have this image of, some idyllic little heaven, totally tranquil. And Burma in particular was outrageous. Like, it's a very good-hearted place in a lot of ways, and they do a lot of social service, the retreat centers and the monasteries, and or they did, and so women were in some dorm building, and just outside they were building. They were doing construction for like widows who had nowhere else to go, no one else, no family to take care of them, whatever. So it was a totally noble thing, but it was like construction right outside your door. It was like maddening. You know, you go all the way there and it's like a schlep and you have to, I mean, you need like typhoid. And I mean, it's just like, it's like a trip. And then you're there and it's like so noisy all the time. And I was doing walking meditation once on the veranda, sort of outside our rooms. And one of my friends in the room next door, I watched her like hurl open the door, come marching out with this big can of like powdered milk or something like that, and she reached her arm back like this. She was going to hurl it at the people doing the construction. It's like she just had it. She couldn't handle it all. And I just reached my hand out and grabbed hers. Said, don't do that. Like, don't do that. But, it's either like too freaky and you're always annoyed, or you say, okay, I'm going to incorporate the sound. And, as I said in writing to somebody with a written question for this challenge, unless you're responsible for responding to the sound, which might be the case, then we practice with it without, and you can honor all your feelings that you hate what's going on, or it's annoying, or it's interesting, or it's amusing, or whatever. But you can incorporate those as well into the meditation itself.
Thank you. So we have a lot more questions than we're going to have time to get to, and I just want to tell folks that some of these I think will carry over into our next Q&A session, and some of them Sharon will just be able to answer privately by emailing you. So we'll definitely get to all of these that we don't have time for. I thought before we close today, there's a question about cultivating compassion from Kim. At the moment I notice the mind wanders, I snatch my attention back to the breath. How can I be more gentle, less harsh?
I mean, I think right there, maybe that intensity will arise, like, damn it, get back. But right there, you can say something to yourself, which is just a reminder, not to put yourself down for that reaction. It's just a habit that we all have, but more, I mean, it's very personal. You have to see what works for you. But people say things like, it's okay, or now I can start again, or an image that one of my teachers used was exercising the letting go muscle, which I liked a lot. And so sometimes I would say that. It's like, okay, now I'm going to exercise the letting go muscle. And you practice just like letting go, which is different than hurling something across the room. It's just like, oh, let it go. Or some people teach like, oh, now I can be grateful. I have the chance to start again. They congratulate themselves. Like, this is a wonderful moment. That's not exactly my thing. As I often say, I am a New Yorker, like that would be a little far for me. Like, wow, I'm so glad, when I'm not really glad. But there's something about that. And if that works for you, that's wonderful. But there's something about realizing you haven't failed with your mind wandering, that it's okay, that I think is very important. And for me, it could be as simple as like, oh, start again.
And can you talk a little about like what one can expect as they keep practicing? Like, will those kind of mental habits fade? Do they disappear all at once? And what's that like for you after so many years of meditation?
Nothing disappears all at once, so you don't have to think about that. Yeah, they do fade, but for sure. But the fact that they don't disappear all at once shouldn't, or disappear at all, maybe, shouldn't lead to discouragement, because I think we get more confident and more empowered in our ability to deal with what's coming up, so that, a certain kind of feeling or thought comes up again, and you realize, I don't have to take that to heart. I don't have to believe that utterly. I don't have to let that take me on a journey, like next year will be exactly like this. Um, or as I say to myself, you don't have to rehearse that. Why are you rehearsing that catastrophic outcome? So there's much more space when something comes up. These habits also tend to come up both less frequently, but also less solidly, in a way. Like what used to come up like an iron bar is more like a piece of gauze or something. It's like it comes up, but it's all right. Um, but people do tend to be discouraged. I think, I can't believe it. I've been meditating, and same old thing gets me all reactive, and same stupid thing gets me all reactive. And what very few people realize is that if we used to get completely enveloped and overcome by something for an hour and it's now 3 minutes, that's a big change in the quality of our lives. It's usually a pretty painful 3 minutes. So very few people look back and say, oh, it used to be a lot longer. But that's exactly how it happens, is that still may come up. We still may get caught. We are not likely to get caught for as long. And if we are now and then, it's not going to be always by any means.
And here's a follow-up that's kind of in that same realm. Any tips for the nature that resists anything that I decide I want to do to make me feel better?
Here too, I mean, there are a bunch of different approaches. One is, I'm laughing because, of course, it's very common. Um, One is learn something about the resistor. It's like by hanging out with these different things, these different thoughts, these different emotions, these different patterns, we get the chance to see nuance and see subtlety and see different factors, like sometimes resistance is kind of a rebellious nature that's good, and then you have to decide, what do I actually want to do, that not that's superimposed upon me by some system or something like that. Sometimes the resistance is more about fear. It's feeling I can't do anything really well, so I think I won't. Sometimes it's cynicism, which is just a habit, that instead of like diving into something to see for myself if it's worth doing, I'll just assume it's not worth doing, Um, but in all cases, I think we have to be realistic in our resolves. And again, for me, structure is really helpful, and I I do better, not having like an open-ended commitment, thinking I'm gonna practice every day for 10 minutes for a month, or 5 minutes for a week, whatever it is, and then, because then I'll just really do it. And remember that it's helpful, it's important to assess, to evaluate, to decide if you want to continue on with something. But you don't want to be evaluating every moment, because then you're never actually doing the thing, You've stepped out of it in order to figure it out in some way or dismiss it. And then we say in meditation, and this is very important, that if you're going to evaluate, you have to look at your life, not at that, say, 12-minute period where you're meditating. I say 12 minutes because my neuroscientist friend said that's what her lab found will change your brain. So another friend who's a neuroscientist told me 7 to 9 minutes, but when I told her that, she said, no, we found 12. So it's like nobody knows exactly, and there's not like a particular number, but it gives you a hint that nobody's saying you have to do this 18 hours a day in order to get demonstrable brain changes. So anyway, so like uh, you may say, I still get sleepy, or I still have anxiety come up in those 12 minutes, or whatever. But you might be really different with your family, or how you speak to yourself when you've made a mistake. And that's where it counts, actually.
Thank you. So I think I'll close the question asking for the time being, but I did just want to let people know that we're going to make the recording available of this Zoom inside Teachable. So you'll all receive email instructions about how you can access it, and both audio and video, and a transcript of it as well. And we have another Q&A session that is happening in a few weeks' time. So for those of you who maybe haven't noticed, there are also comments in all of the lessons. So that's a great place to ask Sharon questions or just share your experience. And I'll give it back to Sharon to finish for us.
Thank you so much. Because we've gone a little over, maybe we won't do a final practice together, but if you can, it would be a great thing to do. And I really appreciate you so much for being part of this experience. And I will try to respond. And there's certain practical questions, that have come in, and we'll certainly try to respond. So I will just say, for the person who has not started the challenge yet, should they start with day 1 or start tonight on day 8? And I say start with day 1 and really enjoy it, because it's this wonderful experiment. It's a great gift to give to oneself. So thank you.